Good morning, everyone. We are now at 320 odd people on this call and growing by the minute. We have had a fantastic response to this webinar, so the numbers we're expecting to keep going up. So I'm just going to get started and let people join the call as they do, starting by welcoming you all to the meeting or to the webinar, and we'll do a quick round of introductions before we get started. Simon, would you like to come in and introduce yourself first?
Yeah, thanks very much, Suzi. Good morning, everyone. Delighted to see so many people joining us this morning. My name's Simon Cameron. I'm the Chief Officer of Corporate Policy in COSLA, which, for anyone that doesn't know, is the Convention of Scottish Local Authorities. So we represent all 32 councils. I'm the National Trauma Transformation Programme lead within COSLA, supporting the COSLA President and colleagues across the organisation.
Thank you. And I am co-chairing with Simon. I'm Suzi Macpherson. I work in the Mental Health Directorate in the Scottish Government, and I have lead responsibility alongside Simon and COSLA for the National Trauma Transformation Programme. We are co-owners with the COSLA President and the Minister for oh goodness, I've forgotten her title. Social care, mental well-being and sport. As it shows you that I'm still running on empty this morning. Apologies.
It's a ridiculously long title.
It is, isn't it, Miss Todd? Sorry, Maree, but welcome. Thank you for forgiving me your title. I obviously know you very well. So I'm just going to do a quick round of welcomes and introductions to get us started. And Laura, do keep me right here if I'm going in the wrong order, but it's just to give you a bit of a brief background to get us warmed up this morning. There's a Scottish Government and COSLA ambition to have a trauma-informed workforce and services across Scotland, one that is capable of recognising where people are affected by trauma and adversity, and that is able to respond in ways that prevent further harm and support recovery and can address inequalities and improve life chances. The National Trauma Transformation Programme, which I'm now going to refer to as the NTTP for short, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's a bit of a clunky phrase. It's a major and long-term change programme that aims to support the above vision that I've just set out. It provides a wide range of learning resources, guidance and implementation support for all sectors of the workforce, including leaders, to upskill staff to the appropriate level of trauma-informed and responsive practice, and critically to embed and sustain this model of working. In October 2023, the National Trauma Transformation Programme published the roadmap for creating trauma-informed and responsive change. This resource has been designed to help services and organisations in Scotland identify and reflect on progress, strengths and opportunities for embedding a trauma-informed and responsive approach across policy and practice. The Improvement Service is our partner with Scottish Government, with COSLA, with NHS Education for Scotland and Resilience Learning Partnership is hosting this event today, and thank you to them for doing so. The intent of that is to provide an introduction to the roadmap for those of you that haven't accessed it before, and to share learning from across the Scottish context around how different services and organisations are using the roadmap to support them in their journey towards embedding a trauma-informed and responsive approach. So that's a kind of introduction to what we're going to get out of today. Really looking forward to that. And as is always the case with any event about trauma, although we won't be getting into specifics around incidents, sometimes these issues can be difficult for people. So please just kind of look after yourself and those around you as we go through the event. So that's the housekeeping done. You're still going to be hearing from me for another minute or so, so my dulcet tones, forgive me for having such a long intro. We really wanted, as part of this webinar, to recognise the challenging context we're working in. Ongoing complexities affect us around both the public and third sector, with complex needs identified across workforces and communities, and the challenges of embedding a trauma-informed and responsive approach within a constantly shifting landscape is something we shouldn't underestimate. We know that embedding sustainable trauma-informed and responsive ways of working is rooted in a long-term cultural change programme which affects our organisations and systems And it's a key message of the roadmap is to recognise that long-term cultural change and the strengths and challenges that go with that. Hopefully the learning that you're hearing from today's session will help you reflect on the strengths of your own services and organisations and the potential opportunities for improvement as you hear from other people and your own organisations about what's happening. We're now up to 460 people on the call. We've had over 700 register for this event. So we really hope that we're going to have a lot of opportunities here to hear from different organisations through the questions and through the speakers, and that you'll feel inspired and energised to think about how can we work together and individually and collectively to build on the momentum that we've built to date to embed a trauma-informed responsive approach across our organisations, systems and workforces. So I'm going to now pass over to Jenny. Thank you, everyone.
Morning, everybody. It is brilliant to see so many people here this morning, seeing all the introductions in the chat coming in. Before we get started with the kind of meatier parts of the agenda, we really wanted to hear from everybody here as well around what you're hoping to get out of today. So we're going to be using Mentimeter throughout the morning to hear from you directly in the audience, and Ariane will share a QR code and link in the chat shortly, or you can go to menti.com and use the code 77434979 when prompted. So if you just want to go to a separate browser window or use your phone or tablet or separate device to do that, that'd be great. As Suzi mentioned, the aims of today are really to introduce the roadmap and share some learning from across Scotland around how different organisations and services have been using the roadmap to guide their journeys to embed trauma-informed practice across their practice and policies. So we just really wanted to hear a bit more about what you're hoping to get out of the day before we get kind of stuck in with that. Just great seeing some things coming up already. So seeing things around more awareness, better understanding of the roadmap, thinking about the impact of the roadmap and that's having inspiration and encouragement. Hopefully you'll be getting that in spades this morning, hearing from our brilliant colleagues from across Scotland. Hearing how other people have been using the roadmap, getting some inspiration from that, thinking about what changes you need to implement across your services. Brilliant to see all of these responses coming in. They're coming in so fast and thick that I barely have time to read them before they're moving on. Conscious of time, we're going to keep that just rolling. It will be up it will be open throughout the session, so feel free to keep sharing. It's great to hear from those of you who've joined us this morning and seeing lots here around ideas, information, building knowledge, learning from others, getting inspiration, kind of raising that awareness of the roadmap and understanding of how we can use it and apply it in our own services. So please keep those reflections coming in. Use the chat as well for any reflections throughout the morning, but in the interest of time I'm going to hand back to Simon to take us to the next part of the agenda.
Thanks very much, Jenny, and that's been excellent. Thanks, Suzi, for that introduction. And great to see, as Jenny says, so many kind of comments coming in thick and fast there. So please do keep engaging as we go through the session this morning. I'm going to pass across, and we're going to have some opening remarks from the Minister for Social Care, Mental Wellbeing and Sport, Miss Maree Todd, who is, as we can see, is with us this morning, but also from the COSLA President, Councillor Shona Morrison. We're going to hear first of all from Councillor Morrison, who has produced a short video for us this morning because unfortunately due to full council she's unable to attend. So I'll ask the team to hit play. What I will say is the sound may be quite quiet, so please do turn up your volume so that you can hear the message from Councillor Morrison. Over to the team. Thanks.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you for inviting me to speak at today's event, and I am so sorry that I'm not able to be with you all. It is a privilege to be involved in this important work, and I am always delighted to hear about the excellent work that is going on across the country. However, it is fair to say that there is still much to be done, and I acknowledge there are challenges to overcome as we work towards our shared longer-term objectives. I would like to emphasise COSLA's continued support to this key area of work. COSLA is committed to the ambition to embed a trauma-informed and responsive approach across the system, services and workforces. Because of everyone here today, Scotland has paved the way to help improve the lives of individuals who have endured trauma in their lifetime. This work will be key in the ongoing commitment to a public service reform, which is a joint commitment for COSLA and the Scottish Government, and this work will be essential to help support the communities we serve. However, I know that you all will agree this is not as simple as training our workforce. This requires a longer-term transformational culture shift to achieve real sustainable change. The COSLA Vice President and I continue to carry out our visits to all of Scotland's local authorities, and it's a privilege to hear the outstanding work which is taking place locally and the benefits to our communities. I'm taking this opportunity to promote the work of the NTTP to help support our longer-term goals of a culture shift towards a trauma-informed, responsive approach across our policy and practice. The roadmap is an excellent tool to help support the work of the National Trauma Transformation Programme. This tool incorporates knowledge from leaders, professionals across a range of services, as well as what people with lived experience have identified will support their recovery. Therefore, it plays a key role in helping us to achieve our aims to implement a trauma-informed approach across our organisations and policy. The roadmap, as you'll see, supports our workforce in a way that helps our communities access the services they are entitled to. In turn, it helps us move toward our longer-term objectives of early intervention and prevention to achieve meaningful change across our services. I hope you all take the opportunity today to ask questions and share knowledge and good practice around the virtual room, as the work you're all doing day to day is bringing this work to life, and I hope you find value in utilising the roadmap for this. However, I also recognise we all face a changing landscape, and there's no quick fix to achieve this kind of transformation, which will be discussed today. This will involve change in practice at all levels, and at times may seem slow and challenging, particularly with the complexities we face in the public and third sector with resource and capacity implications. However, the values and behaviours we all have as public servants is critical to changing the experiences of those who rely on and use our services. Therefore, it's essential we continue to come together to share challenges and work through barriers to help address concerns, and I'm very grateful to you all for the work which you're doing. I would just like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who's been involved in arranging today's events, as it looks like it will be an excellent opportunity to discuss and share knowledge and best practice to help drive forward the change we want to see. The roadmap is an invaluable tool, and I hope you take the opportunity today to understand how it can best work for you and colleagues locally, and I look forward to hearing your feedback from officers. Finally, I'd like to extend my thanks to colleagues at the Improvement Service for organising today's excellent event, and our partners NHS Education for Scotland, Resilience Learning Partnership and the Scottish Government. I hope you all enjoyed today's session, and I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Great. So without further ado, because I'm conscious of time, I'm going to pass to Miss Maree Todd for her introductory remarks. Miss Todd.
Thanks very much, Simon. It's really lovely to be with you all today, all 492 of you, so I'm just delighted to see such numbers. And I know it's going to be a really interesting session. It's great to see all the chat and hubbub. It's particularly lovely to see people introducing themselves from all over the country. So thank you very much for having me along today. The Scottish Government remains firmly committed to our shared ambition with COSLA for a trauma-informed workforce and services right across Scotland. And I'm very grateful for Councillor Morrison's remarks and for COSLA's continued and actually invaluable support for this work to Trauma-informed and responsive workforces and services is one of the core principles set out in our mental health and wellbeing strategy. The work that you all do links really closely to the First Minister's stated priorities, especially around public service reform. We are very clear that trauma-informed and responsive systems and services are an essential part of that public service reform agenda, shifting towards early intervention and prevention, helping people to access the care and support that they need and that they're entitled to. The roadmap's a crucial resource to support the aims of the National Trauma Transformation Programme. And I agree, Suzi, that is a longer name even than my title. So we'll for once choose the acronym, the NTTP. As you know, it draws extensively on people with lived experience of psychological trauma. It draws extensively on what they've told us would help to support their recovery, improve access to support, reduce re-traumatisation and foster their resilience. It's also informed by what experts and leaders across the services and organisations have told us would help to implement a trauma-informed and responsive approach across policy and practice. So in short, the roadmap is a key resource for us all in our collective journey towards embedding a trauma-informed and responsive approach across our workforce, systems and services. Now, when I took part in the most recent NTTP collective leadership group in September, members talked about the importance of sharing the wealth of knowledge and good practice that already exists, and about courageous leadership in making this work tangible. They were very clear in acknowledging the role of the roadmap, and personally, I'm keen to understand and promote its potential, as well as what's already starting to emerge through how people are using it. Now, in saying that, we know, as Shona Morrison said, there is no easy or quick fix to achieve the transformation that we seek. Like the NTTP itself, the roadmap will require demanding and sometimes seismic long-term shifts in practice and behaviour at all levels in organisations. That will inevitably be hard to sustain, and it'll feel challenging at times. The work is complex and multifaceted across all the 9 interdependent themes of the roadmap. It needs drive, commitment, energy and resilience from us all. But oh my goodness, the potential prize is huge. At the last learning event back in September, I spoke about celebrating progress, and I make absolutely no apology for doing so again today. It's really important for us to pause, especially when things are so busy and so stretched, and focus on the progress that's being made. In tough times, both in terms of workloads and ongoing financial constraints, we need to hold the space to share, reflect, and to celebrate what's going well. It matters to give our energy and our attention to the wins without dismissing or minimising the challenges. There are so many areas of good practice, some of which will be spoken about today, and I appreciate the drive and passion and commitment that you all bring as professionals to this work, coming together to share key insights and learning, to consciously celebrate success and to support each other as we learn from and as we address our shared challenges is absolutely crucial. It matters to draw energy from the many inspiring people and all of good work that is already underway across the NTTP. All, of course, with the aim of helping those of us who may have experienced trauma to access the services and support that we need, not just to survive, but to thrive. So my sincere thanks to every single one of you. I see we're over 500 now the numbers have been ticking up as I've been speaking, for your work on the NTTP, for attending this valuable event today, and for all that you do to help to drive forward the vital change that we seek. I hope that today's event gives you some much needed time to reflect on what the roadmap can offer you in your work, and I very much look forward to hearing how it goes. And thank you to all our wonderful national partners in this work, COSLA, MES, RLP, and particularly the Improvement Service who organised today's event. I wish you all a very successful, productive and enjoyable day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. That was fantastic from both the COSLA President and from the Minister there. I know that, Minister, you'll be staying around for a little while to join us to hear some of the rest of it, but I appreciate you've got a full diary, so can't stay for the full event, but really grateful for your time, so thank you so much. We're now going to hear any more detail about the roadmap from Laura James, who's the National Improvement Lead for Trauma at the Improvement Service. Just a quick reminder to people as we go through this to please post your questions in the chat, and they will be picked up as we go out through the event. So pass over to Laura.
Thanks so much, and thanks so much to Councillor Morrison and to Ms Todd as well for those opening remarks. Thanks so much for joining us all today. It's amazing to see over 500 people now. I'm really delighted to see you all. As Suzi said, I'm Laura James. I'm the National Improvement Lead for our trauma work at the Improvement Service. And for those of you who might not be aware, we're the National Improvement Organisation for local authorities in Scotland, and we deliver improvement support that helps councils to provide things like effective community leadership, strong local governance, and deliver high quality, efficient local services. And since 2020, the IS has supported local authorities and community planning partners with strengthening their capacity and capability around embedding a trauma-informed approach. The IS was one of the main authors of the roadmap, alongside a number of other key partners and colleagues. We published it in late 2023, and we're using this webinar as an opportunity to provide you with an introduction to what the roadmap is and how it can support you. And also, now it's been out in the world for over a year, try and give you some inspiration and ideas from other organisations about how they've been using it as well. So, oh, my slides are stuck. The session isn't intended to be an exhaustive walkthrough of everything that's in the roadmap or a step-by-step guide to how to use it. This will really be a brief introduction, just to give you a flavour of what it is, and we really encourage you to take a look at the roadmap on the NTTP website afterwards. So I guess before we get started with the ins and outs, what is the roadmap? And I'll talk about this in more detail later on. But the roadmap is a freely accessible, evidence-based tool designed to support services and organisations identify and reflect on progress, strengths and opportunities for embedding a trauma-informed and responsive approach across policy and practice. Part 1 provides an overview of why trauma-informed and responsive organisations, systems and workforces matter and what good looks and feels like. And part 2 contains a couple of bits. There's a readiness checklist to support reflective, collaborative discussions about whether your organisation is ready to start this work. And there's also a self-assessment that provides a suggested roadmap of activities to support that sustainable and effective progress for this work, helping your organisation develop an action plan as well. And there are a couple of other bits, other tools, which I'll talk about later as well. And I should flag early on, anyone is able to access and download any part of the roadmap from the NTTP website. It's not there specifically for any one sector. It's designed for any service or organisation to use as they wish and use it independently as well. So why do we develop the roadmap? As a society, we're becoming increasingly aware that living through traumatic events is more common than we previously realised. Many of us will have lived and living experience of trauma, and trauma we know can affect us at any stage of our lives. We also know that there's no them and us. The prevalence of traumatic experiences means that trauma will inevitably impact many of those within our workforce, many of us here today, whether that's through our personal experiences or through the work that we do. There's growing evidence that trauma-informed and responsive organisations, systems and practice where the impact of trauma is understood by staff and where systems and ways of working are adapted accordingly, this can reduce barriers for people to access support. So really the roadmap is about building on the growing evidence base of how we can better design and deliver services and systems to improve outcomes for people and communities across Scotland. And in Scotland, we're incredibly lucky to have the strong foundation of the Transforming Psychological Trauma Knowledge and Skills Framework for the Scottish workforce, accompanied by the Scottish Psychological Trauma Training Plan developed by NES, and these are all available on the NCTP website as well. These are designed to create a shared language and understanding around what we need to know and do in order to practice in a trauma-informed and responsive way. We also know that from our sustained engagement with a real diverse range of sectors, organisations and colleagues and experts by experience across Scotland, we kept hearing that everyone wanted a bit more support in embedding this work into both policy and practice, including a really specific focus on what trauma-informed services, organisations and systems look and feel like, so that we can support the workforce to adapt their practice to work in a way that embodies the key principles of a trauma-informed approach. We also knew, there's lots of frameworks, self-assessments and guidance out there, nationally and internationally, to support trauma training into practice. But inevitably what we heard from stakeholders across Scotland was the need for a tool that's rooted in the Scottish context and one that can provide that consistency of approach around implementation and support progress across Scotland in a more systematic way. And we also recognise that a lot of these frameworks were often focused on one particular service area, so a mental health service or housing service, and often not easily adaptable for other services. So to respond to the ambition, the Scottish Government and COSLA ambition, we knew we needed to design something that was available for any organisation to use. So I won't talk about these in any huge amount of detail, but there are a few aims of the roadmap, few key aims of the roadmap, really about raising awareness of the what, why and how. So building on that evidence base, highlighting the different components of a trauma-informed and responsive approach and what it looks and feels like when it's embedded within an organisation, and the kinds of strategic and operational activities that can support organisations to achieve this. It's about supporting assessment and improvement, so supporting any service or organisation to identify and reflect on their progress, successes, strengths and opportunities for improvement with this work, and taking that real strengths-based reflective approach. And really helping organisations determine priorities to take forward this work and supporting with action planning, focusing, I think, particularly on quality rather than just quantity of work taking place. It's also based on what stakeholders were telling us was needed around providing that consistency across Scotland in terms of what trauma-informed and responsive organisations, systems and workforces look like, and a consistent basis for building a national picture across Scotland to identify that good practice, those common opportunities and collective challenges. And it's also about demonstrating impact. So really supporting organisations to think about how do we evidence the potential contributions or impact of a trauma-informed and responsive approach, not just that focus on progress and activities. And also encouraging local and national government and the range of strategic bodies we're all working with to recognise a trauma-informed and responsive approach as a central part of delivering other key national agendas and our local and national and organisational priorities as well. So we set ourselves a wee bit of an ambition with those aims. I won't go into this in any detail, but we developed the roadmap drawing on, as Ms. Todd said, drawing on multiple kinds of evidence and expertise to develop the roadmap. We drew on expertise by experience, expertise through profession, and expertise through leadership across multiple sectors and organisations as well. Who's the roadmap for? I think that's an absolute key message we want everyone to get from today. It's for everyone. If trauma is everyone's business, we wanted to develop a tool that can support any team or service or organisation in Scotland, whether you're in the public, third, voluntary or private sector, whether you're a large complex organisation or you're a smaller service, whether you're delivering frontline support or not, whether you've already begun this work or you're starting out. This is a tool for everyone, for all services or organisations to use, pick up and use independently. Some others I wanted to flag It's also designed to support commissioners and funders to help them understand the benefits of a trauma-informed and responsive approach, what good practice looks like, and what can be expected of organisations if we're asking them to be trauma-informed in our commissioning process, for example, or if they're saying that they're working in a trauma-informed way. It's for inspection bodies to help them and the organisations they support understand how a trauma-informed and responsive approach contributes to their own frameworks and standards and guidance as well. It's for all of our elected officials, for our local communities, for our strategic bodies and partnerships like community planning partnerships, to help them gain a better understanding of the work that's being undertaken at local and national levels and the impact this is having, ultimately really helping to strengthen local and national democratic accountability. And it's also for people affected by trauma, our families and our support networks, to raise awareness of what we can expect from trauma-informed and responsive organisations, systems and workforces, and the key role that those of us with lived experience of trauma have to play in shaping our organisations and systems so that they resist re-traumatisation, recognise resilience and support people's recovery. So we're building on that really strong foundation of the knowledge and skills framework and the training plan from NES a few years ago. We know that workforce training is a key component of any organisation's journey to becoming trauma-informed and responsive. But the evidence shows us that equally important are the culture, environments and supportive ways of working that in an organisation that can enable sustainable change, and that will ultimately make a difference to all of us who are affected by trauma. So we've all been that no matter how trauma-informed a practitioner might be, if we're then constrained by protocols or policies that don't recognise the impact of trauma, we might be unable to minimise the risk of re-traumatisation that our training has taught us to recognise. And this can really risk disempowering staff, creating a sense of helplessness, and potentially leading to disengagement from empathy for the people that we're supporting. So part one of the roadmap provides an overview of why trauma-informed and responsive organisation systems and workforces matter and what good looks and feels like. And it's built on that growing evidence base that there are multiple drivers within an organisation that support embedding this work. So these really include, and I won't go into these in any detail, but just very, very briefly, these include an organisational culture that recognises the impact of trauma and sees being trauma-informed as a way of working and an approach to everything that it does, rather than a standalone specific intervention or training project. And it's where the key principles are intrinsic within the organisation and second nature to everyone. It's about having leadership at all levels that understands, drives and inspires trauma-informed change, embodies those key principles and builds accountability for that long-term improvement. It's about staff feeling that their well-being is valued and prioritised, that they've got time and space to access, proactive, protective and reactive well-being supports. It's about our feedback loops with people accessing, working in and with our organisation that we use to strengthen continued improvement of our services. It's about that routine, meaningful sharing of power with people with lived experience of trauma so that services and systems are collaboratively designed and delivered around people's needs rather than only around the needs of our systems. It's where staff have the knowledge, skills, confidence and capacity to recognise and respond to people affected by trauma through training and continued implementation support relevant to their job role and service remit. It's about those policies and processes in our organisations that reflect an understanding of the prevalence and impact of trauma and really hardwire a trauma-informed approach into everything that we do. It's about a budget that reflects this work as a priority, supports that long-term commitment to this work and ensures there are sufficient resources for this work. And it's a commitment to ensuring that every aspect of how we design and deliver services, so every aspect of a person's experience of a service, from first contact with a receptionist or a website, through to processes like referrals, how we share data with other organisations, what our physical buildings look like, making sure they're all underpinned by the key principles of safety, choice, trust, collaboration and empowerment. So hopefully you'll see that part one focuses on the what and the why of this work. Part two focuses on the how, and it contains two tools. The first is a really brief readiness checklist. And this is because research tells us that to successfully implement a trauma-informed and responsive approach, an organisation needs to have a competent and confident workforce, organisational support and effective leadership, Without having these in place, trauma training or any other intervention aimed at trauma-informed and responsive change is often unlikely to result in sustainable improvements. We know that training staff about trauma in the absence of a supportive culture, without opportunities to apply the training in practice, and without leadership commitment to adapting policies and systems, can really run the risk of creating frustration and burnout for staff. So the brief checklist at the start of part 2 provides some questions that can really help you consider whether your organisation is ready, willing and able to do this work safely and effectively, and really help with some collaborative, honest discussions about this work. The second tool is kind of the big meaty part of the roadmap. It's a self-assessment checklist that includes a roadmap of strategic and operational activities within those 9 key themes or drivers that I talked about on the previous slide. This isn't an exhaustive or prescriptive list of activities for every organisation to follow, but they are suggestions based on the growing evidence base. So you might not be able to read much of this slide, absolutely fine. But we also know from the evidence and from quality improvement methodologies that this work takes time and it's a journey. Work across all parts of the roadmap can't happen all at once, and it's also not a linear journey. If your organisation kind of looks at the roadmap, you'll often find you've got lots of strengths maybe in one area down the road and opportunities for improvement in other areas as well. So when you look at the roadmap, you'll see the self-assessment is broken down into 6 stages following that kind of improvement journey, thinking about the building blocks. So starting with the initial activities that can help you create the right conditions to support this work. So that focus on organisational culture, leadership and staff care, support and wellbeing, through to those activities to support long-term sustainability and how we might adapt our services and systems. So as you go through the self-assessment for each group of activities, you're asked to rate where you think your organisation is at. You'll be asked to provide evidence and reflections that support your views as to the extent to which these activities are happening in your organisation, and identify any areas for improvement. That can help you collectively identify priorities for this work and collaboratively develop an action plan for your organisation as well. And the roadmap contains an action planning template that you're obviously welcome to use. And we want to emphasize as well, you don't need to complete the entire self-assessment all at once. It's really thinking about what will be most supportive for your organisation at this time. It might be that you chunk it up a little bit more. I won't talk about these in any detail, but there are a couple of additional tools as well I wanted to flag. NES produced a brilliant trauma lens walkthrough several years ago, which focuses on all those aspects of the last key driver in the roadmap, focused on how we design and deliver services. So that's everything from our physical environments to our communications, how we work with partner organisations, etc. And it's designed to guide you to take a walkthrough of your service through the eyes of someone affected by trauma, to really help you identify what you're doing well and where improvements could be made. And we updated this tool as part of the roadmap, so some of you might have seen the previous version. We also included a short list of prompt questions to help you take a trauma-informed lens to policies and processes. So that's whether you're developing new policies or reviewing existing ones. So those questions might be helpful for that as well. We also included a logic model in the roadmap. It really helps to start to coalesce around outcomes. We find a lot of the trauma work often focuses on our processes and activities and progress, rather than necessarily outcomes. So the logic model starts to try to give us some consistency around Scotland, around what we're all trying to achieve when we're talking about embedding a trauma-informed approach. It's very high level and quite generic, so it's designed to be adapted by your service or organisation for the work you're doing with this. It's also designed so that we can see there are multiple benefits to this work, benefits for staff, benefits for those of us with lived experience of trauma, and for our organisations and systems and leaders, because this work supports the outcomes and priorities we're already working towards locally, nationally and organisationally. And while much of the roadmap focuses on helping us understand the how and the progress of this work in our organisations, we really want to encourage you to think about how you can evidence and understand the impact of this work. So thinking about what outcomes are you working towards, what information or evidence do you have that can help you understand the impact of your activities, what change is happening over time, and how can you tell that story of change. So I'm gonna, this is one of my final slides, but I wanted to finish with some key messages for getting started, because I often think if you pick up the roadmap, it can feel like a huge document and possibly quite overwhelming. So some key messages: start where you are, do what you can with what you've got. You're going to be building on existing good practice in your organisation. You're not going to be starting from scratch. Small changes can make a big difference. While some of the stuff we're talking about is about long-term organisational and culture change, there are lots of things in that roadmap that are small, quick, easy wins. Making changes to how we work has the potential to be overwhelming, so we absolutely need to prioritise staff care, support and wellbeing at the start of this work. Think about what works for your service or your organisation. The roadmap is designed to be flexible. It's not a prescriptive list of activities. You might want to think about how you'll approach it. Will you take a whole organisation approach, or will you consider smaller tests of change in different teams or services? And I really encourage you to consider your organisation's readiness for starting this work. Embedding a trauma-informed and responsive approach takes time. It's rooted in long-term culture change and that cycle of continuous improvement. We cannot do all this work at once. I really wanted to flag as well, the self-assessment is designed to be used in combination with feedback loops and engagement with staff and the people and communities you serve. So it's not that a one-off tick box exercise, but really how can it be built into your wider improvement planning processes. Finally, there's loads of learning to take inspiration from. There's lots of learning on the NTTP website around how different services and organisations are approaching this work, from maternity to justice to housing, across the public and third sectors. There's lots of videos, learning reports and case studies to help inspire you. So please, I really encourage you to visit the website and take a look around. So that's me finished. That's the NTTP website, and obviously feel free to email us at the Improvement Service if you've got any questions. I really hope that's been a helpful overview of the roadmap and help break it down a little bit into something a little bit more manageable and approachable. But thank you so much for listening, and I'll pass back to Simon for the next part. Thanks, Simon.
I hope you're all doing okay. I realise that this is a pacey webinar, but we're covering quite a lot of ground. So just carry on posting in the chat if there's any issues or questions. So I'm going to turn now to looking at inviting some speakers, colleagues who are working across different services and organisations who've started to use the roadmap to support their work in embedding a trauma-informed and responsive approach. It's just to say at the start, before I introduce the first speaker, this isn't intended to be an exhaustive guide on how to use the roadmap. Rather, these inputs are designed to provide brief insights into different ways different services and organisations have been flexibly using it, depending on where they're at and their priorities around this work. There'll be time for questions with the speakers following all of the inputs, so please share questions in the Q&A and the chat functions as we go along. Speakers, I'm going to ask you, please, each of you to stick to about 5 minutes each for your talks, and I will obviously come in and keep you to time if there's any issues with you running tight on that time. The first speakers, and I'm going to turn my camera off after I've introduced them, is Aileen, Nicol and Jane Kelly. Aileen is the Strategic Inspector for Trauma Informed Champions Group Coordinator, and Jane Kelly is the Service Manager of Strategic Scrutiny at the Care Inspectorate. That's not easy to say. Welcome, and I'll pass over to you now. Thank you.
Thanks very much. You can move on to the next slide. Thanks. So yes, good morning everyone, and thanks so much for the invitation to highlight how we're using the roadmap in the Care Inspectorate. You've obviously introduced ourselves there, so I can skip that. But Aileen will tell you a little bit more in a second about our Trauma Champions work and more about our internal journey. So the Care Inspectorate is the national independent body. We're responsible for scrutiny, assurance and improvement of social care and social work. And within our organisation, we have a number of teams of staff with vast experience and knowledge in undertaking and supporting and enabling this work. The context for today is to share some reflections on the steps that we've taken and the tools that have assisted our learning as we strive to become a trauma-informed organisation. Aileen will tell you more about our Champions Group, which is central to delivering on our intentions. And I also represent the organisation on the National Trauma Responsive Social Work Services Partnership Delivery Group, led by the Scottish Government team. That forum really helps us to connect to the national conversation. It informs our approaches and it helps us gauge our progress. It also informs our understanding of what's been achieved across the social care and social work sectors, as well as the challenges in creating trauma-informed and responsive change. As been said, we're happy to answer any questions, and it's good to hear questions about regulation and scrutiny being posed. But for now, I'll hand over to Aileen, who'll tell you more about what we've done and where we are.
Thanks very much, Jane. And yes, for us, the official start of the journey to become hopefully trauma-informed and trauma-responsive really began with our promise development work, but we very quickly realised that the golden thread of implementing a trauma-informed workforce to support children and families absolutely went hand in hand with the national NTTL and P work that was going on. So fast forward quickly from promise starting to our senior leadership team being invited to sign the National Trauma Leadership Pledge, which they were absolutely committed and ready to do. So next slide, please. And during that time, we also really asked for help from all the agencies that have already been mentioned in the introductions today, and I strongly advise doing that. The relationships that we've had through the improvement service, Shamila's work and the work that Jane was describing have been absolutely invaluable to our understanding of where we go next. And after signing the pledge, we started with 4 senior leaders who stepped forward voluntarily to be our fledgling champions group. And we were really all finding our way together. A first step for us was to make sure that all the NES modules were uploaded to our staff L&D system. And again, we had a trauma-informed promise lens on that because we were developing a learning and development programme around our promise work, and the two were working hand in hand. All members of the early group also completed STILT training. And again, these things, which are free resources, they were absolute gifts to us in our journey as we tried to get our head around where we would even start with this huge, what seemed like huge work. So when the roadmap was published, it just came at the right time for us. It was a really welcome compass for us to think about how we might proceed, because our early work had demonstrated to us that we had a real continuum of experience across the organisation, and yet in other parts of the organisation it was completely new territory for people. You know, when we think about our corporate services and colleagues in comms, our legal team, finance, but they were so integral to our eventual hopeful arrival at offering truly trauma-informed experiences for everyone that we work alongside and on behalf of. So following the part 1 and really thinking about what it meant holistically across all parts of our organisation really helped us. And then we started to work through the checklist. Next slide, please. And all that exploration, which did at times feel a bit like a maze, was thinking about who are our different audiences in the quite unique role we have as a regulator. First and foremost, all of our work has to be about the people on whose behalf we exist, those using care services, living in care settings. We have to get it right for them. How we work with our external colleagues in the way that we approach inspection and we undertake it, everything to do there. And of course, as an employer with our own internal workforce, each other as colleagues, and very importantly, how we take responsibility for our own trauma-informed wellbeing. Next slide, please. So, organic development across all of our teams. We recognised there were pockets of work shaping across different parts of the organisation. We realised at the beginning of the self-assessment that we needed to create our baseline. We were checking in regularly on governance, 6 months, where have we got to? What will we do in the next 6 months ahead? Again, all the resources from the roadmap, NTTL, absolute lifesavers for us, really, in checking in on how are we doing, here's another idea to help, and so on. And I really recommend something that we've only recently done, which was introducing a staff intranet page talking about trauma, to tell the story, to talk about the roadmap, to highlight different explorations and reflections going on in different teams, and all the resources, and we're really going to be building on that. Next slide, please. So where are we right now?
Can I give you a 1 minute warning?
Yes, only a few seconds. Thank you. We are really at our creating the right conditions and enabling readiness stage. 3 focus: to think about these different internal, external approaches, trying to get a baseline. You think a trauma-informed carpet across all the different parts of our organisation, but top-down commitment also, where our senior management team are also reflecting on how they introduce a trauma-informed approach to their day-to-day. And vitally, how we make sure it's part of all the plans that are being rolled out in our work. If we're going to achieve being truly trauma-informed, we have to take the time, work through the relationships, bring a holistic lens, and apply the 5 principles of being trauma-informed. If we don't apply them throughout the journey, we won't be in that truly trauma-informed place. So thank you. That's our story. And yeah, we're finding our way. Thank you.
Brilliant, and I'm sorry to have rushed you there, Aileen and Jane. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass now to Andrew Burgess from City of Edinburgh Council for the next presentation. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. You say presentation, but I don't actually have any slides, so I will just be talking at you for the next couple of minutes. So hello, everyone. I'm Andrew. I work at City of Edinburgh Council and within our organisational development team. I've been collaborating for some time with our trauma lead officer, Cllr on all things trauma-informed. So this is some time ago now, but after taking the decision as a function that we should be adopting the principles and looking to embed such an approach within our organisation, we started attending the National Steering Group meetings. We've got as many people onto the courses as possible, benchmarking with other local authorities, and of course undertook training as part of the National Trauma Training Programme. Around this time the roadmap was introduced. Whilst our trauma lead officer has taken steps to gain approvals for the organisation to become trauma informed and responsive, with an onus on the way we deliver services, there kind of remained the task of how we do things internally. What steps we should be taking to support our colleagues. And I suppose the experience for me sitting in sort of HROD, that kind of presented as an insurmountable task. We didn't necessarily know where to start, who to involve. We had an SME in Cllr, but essentially we were kind of at a loss. And obviously there's quite a lot of literature, I suppose, to look through as well. So enter the roadmap. As we scoped our approach, the roadmap kind of proved to be one of the better, or I suppose more invaluable tools for us. It clearly kind of set out the areas and mechanisms for organizations to develop. It's very prescriptive, is the one thing I'd say. It helped us identify, I suppose, for us and where we sat or were positioned within our organization, what was in our sphere of control. It helped us identify stakeholders who would help inform on others, I suppose, as well. So at the start of the process, there's obviously a lot of reading, learning, other information to digest, which some could say, and some did say when we got them involved in the project group, was a touch overwhelming. So we personally felt that the roadmap was a really good document in helping our project team stay grounded, on task, and focused in scoping our activities. There's obviously the various areas within the roadmap, which informs obviously some of the mechanisms we have in the organisation. So it really helped us stay focused from that perspective. So at this point in time, we're working just now to finalise our colleague wellbeing plan, and I'm delighted to say that one of the key themes that we've developed is around creating psychological safety in our organisation, where we'll look to create awareness across our organisation of trauma and the prevalence, with a view to embedding the trauma training framework with an emphasis on role-based exposure and introducing initiatives to address trauma within our organisation, both where there's that immediate response required and periodically over the longer term. So I'm sure we wouldn't have sort of got to that stage without considerable input from our trauma lead officer, use of the resources and learning from the NTTP and including the roadmap, and in speaking with other organisations, both kind of through meetings like this, or indeed taking sort of discussions offline as well. So just as a sort of parting bit, to that end, I'd be happy to discuss, use of the roadmap within our organisation, how that's informed our activities. I'm just aware there's quite a few people on the call, but happy to extend that as well. I can stick my email in the chat or something. But no, that's where we are and how we got there. Thanks very much.
Brilliant, thank you. That was really fantastically succinct. Thank you, Andrew, and really interesting. I'm going to now pass over to Vicki Bannerman from East Dunbartonshire Council and Health and Social Care Partnership. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Oh, there we go. So hi everyone, my name is Vicki Bannerman and I am the Trauma Informed Practice Coordinator for East Dunbartonshire Council and HSCP. So I'm just going to give a very short overview of how we've used the roadmap to support the focus of the Trauma Informed Steering Group in East Dunbartonshire. So the East Dunbartonshire ACEs and Trauma Collaborative is a multi-agency and multi-sector group incorporating a wide remit across East Dunbartonshire Council, and it's tasked with steering the Trauma Informed and Responsive programme across East Dunbartonshire in all services. So current membership consists of members representing services across the Council, HSCP, national agencies like Police Scotland and Scottish Fire and Rescue, and the third sector organisations present in the area, as well as the Trauma Champions. So the EDACT meets 8 weekly to maintain progress for the subgroups and myself, with 2 in-person events across the year, which are predominantly action-focused sessions to drive priorities forward. So the EDACT has also got 3 subgroups which consider the environment, policies and systems, and people and training, and each subgroup has its own action plan and supports the wide range of services within the EDACT to remain on task and to be able to regularly check in. So the EDACT had slowed down significantly prior to my appointment as the Trauma Informed Practice Coordinator, and members highlighted the need for more opportunities to come together to refine the group's purpose and also identify how to move forward towards actions like rolling out training and supporting lived experience in service design and delivery. Okay, next slide, please. So over the course of 3 in-person events between May 2023 and September 2024, the EDACT members came together to collectively work through aiming to identify their vision, what they were trying to achieve and why that was important to the steering group, and then identify some key priorities they wanted to work towards. So as you can see from the slide, the events moved from the broad vision and general consideration of priorities from a holistic point of view through developing specific key ideas that the steering group members felt were the most important areas to focus on, which fitted into leadership, feedback loops and workforce knowledge and skills. And this then led to the most recent event where we honed in on the first priority, which is felt to be the key part of it as highlighted in the roadmap, which is namely leadership. And then from this, I was able to develop the outcomes and improvement plan, which sets out East Dunbartonshire's ambition and key areas of focus required over 2023 to 2026. Next slide, please. So we've now launched the outcomes and improvement plan for this work in East Dunbartonshire with 5 key priorities, which are taken from the 9 key drivers of the roadmap. So namely leadership, workforce wellbeing, workforce knowledge and skills, feedback loops and power sharing with those with lived experience. The roadmap really helped us to understand this work has to be done as a journey, and it helped people to understand that achieving overarching aims will take time. Using the roadmap helped us break things down into short and medium to long-term goals, and it also supported the steering group to reflect on what the immediate priorities are for this work, knowing that we cannot do it all at once and what tangible actions are required to achieve them. It also helped the steering group move discussions beyond focusing only on training to thinking more broadly around things like organisational culture, systems, workforce wellbeing, and provides a clear, achievable set of deliverables for all levels of the workforce, as well as a structured delivery plan for senior management to understand the aims and goals for services as a whole. And that's me. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Excellent. Thanks, Vicki. I think it's Ciara Burke next from Midlothian Council. Over to you. Hope I pronounced your name okay.
Hi, thank you so much. Yeah, it's Ciara Burke from Midlothian Council. And I'm just going to talk a wee bit about how we have used specifically the Trauma Lens walkthrough tool as part of a trauma-informed audit of some of our adult services. So next slide, please. Just a little bit of context, I suppose, in terms of Midlothian's journey. Midlothian was one of the 3 pilot sites of the NTTP. So there were a number of projects, pieces of work, resources, our network of trainers, and some of this work around our strategy and action plan that had already started prior to the publication of the roadmap. But I suppose it echoes quite a few things that Laura has already mentioned and have been referenced throughout the presentations today, that you know, we were able to use the roadmap retrospectively to sort of sense check what we'd done so far, what might we have missed, and I suppose basically to sort of question and think about whether we were on the right track or not. And you know, I suppose we also really think about, in terms of all of our work, that there's no right or wrong way to use the roadmap or to use the tools, but that actually at different times we might need to use them in different ways, and actually really having that flexible approach has been super useful for us in Midlothian. So yeah, I'm going to come on and speak specifically about how we have been able to use the Trauma Lens walkthrough tool. And as I mentioned, the work that I sort of was tasked with doing was around our adult recovery hub, and really having a wee bit of time and oh, sorry, next slide. Sorry, Jenny. So yeah, using the walkthrough tool within our adult recovery hub was something that I was tasked with doing through our steering group, to really have a think about what it feels like to use that space and to use the services that are based there. And I suppose one of the first things that I wanted to do was spend a bit more time in the environment. The building is in a service area that I was overly familiar with. I'm not based there. And when I do visit, I visit usually with a purpose. I'm usually marching somewhere to meet somebody. I have my lanyard on, all of those things that, probably mean I'm not always very aware of the space. So I went and I spent a bit more time in the space, and what I was really struck by was the fact that my experience of that space might be very, very different to other people's, to the adults who use it. So that offered a real opportunity for collaboration. And I just need to give a massive shout out to Andrew, who I think is on the webinar. So Andrew from Midlothian, he supports us. He uses his lived experience to support the work that we're doing in Midlothian, and I wish every council and local authority had an Andrew. So I spoke with Andrew, and actually together we decided that collaboratively we would think about how we use this tool. And I just was aware that actually the building has a history within the community, and that there are those power dynamics that we really do need to be aware of and think of. So what I did was I familiarised myself with the tool. I sent the tool to Andrew, and we thought about some of the elements of the tool in terms of the traffic light system, recording what's good, what we might want to improve, thinking about some of those red flags that do have the potential to cause re-traumatization or cause trauma for first-time service users as well. So what Andrew and I did then was, rather than actually go into the space and walk through it, we had, we give some consideration to the fact that, people are using that space, and actually how would it feel for them if we were doing that. So instead we decided to meet online and have a bit of a chat, and then I suppose that conversation was a really natural, organic conversation. We'd looked at the tool and we'd used it. And then I sort of gathered some of the points that we discussed and shared those with Andrew. Then we met up for a coffee and talked about and reflected on some of the things that we had discussed. And we focused mainly on access, environment, supporting recovery and relationships. And I've got a wee video from Andrew just with some of his reflections. So next slide, please.
From a lived experience perspective, it's really encouraging to be asked to have a look at the walkthrough and have a think about some of the things that stand out for myself and capture them. A few of the points here. I think in terms of developing these relationships and how it first feels when we're going into somewhere, when we're looking for help, are all major parts in our steps towards getting better again, depending on what we're looking for. The environment, especially the sensory aspect of the building, how does it look, how does it feel coming in? Can it be gentle? Can it be welcoming? Is that okay? And doing this type of work, the lived experience work, you know, it's really about looking into the road that I've travelled and trying to see anything that helps take us forward. Thank you.
Super, thank you. And just a last slide, which is one of the sort of quotes that we really focused on, that idea that actually we talk about resources and we talk about how difficult it is, but one of the real changes that we could make is just that idea of thinking about our relational practice. So a change from why are you here to how can I help or support. So that's it. Thank you so much, everyone.
Oh, sorry, my mic wasn't coming off there. Thank you so much. That was great. And I love the diversity of all these different talks. It's really helpful. So I'm going to now hand over to our final speaker, which is Kirsty Pate, who is in Scottish Government in Trauma Responsive Social Work Services. Kirsty.
Thanks, Suzi. I'm delighted to be here contributing to this kind of ongoing learning that's evolving across Scotland in relation to the roadmap. As Suzi said, I lead the Trauma Responsive Social Work Services programme, and one part of the support that we're providing to social work services and multidisciplinary partners in Scotland is a programme of implementation and learning support, and we've used the roadmap throughout that work over the last year. We've also used it in some standalone pieces of work as well, so we thought it'd be helpful to share some reflections from the use of the roadmap and particular parts of it, just comments and feedback we've got from people that we've collaborated with, but also just some learning from our team's own experiences too. Next slide. So, as Laura described earlier, can we just click on, I need to go forward, sorry. Laura described earlier, there's different parts to the roadmap, and people on this call are probably really familiar with some parts of it and maybe less so familiar with some others. I specifically wanted to focus on using part 2 of the roadmap. That's been the primary work that we've done with leaders over the past year. And so really what we've been doing is to look at a baseline self-assessment with each area that we're supporting to help them to identify priorities and develop their plan. But prior to that, we've made an effort to kind of just slow down and take a little bit of time to use the readiness checklist. And people have already commented on how much progress has been made on this work over the years, and in social work services there's been a lot of improvement across systems. So using the readiness checklist really allows people involved in the work to take stock of all of that. Next slide, please. Excuse me. Specifically using the readiness checklist has provided an opportunity for us to support local leaders to think about some of those foundational components around culture and the systems that support workforce wellbeing. And we know that without these being in place, trauma training or any other intervention aimed at trauma responsive change is unlikely to result in a sustainable improvement over time. So focusing on these elements seems to have allowed local leaders to really think about how can they continue with the work that's already underway in a way that's safe and effective. So we've used the checklist with quite small groups at times, but also with larger groups. We've used it operationally, we've used it strategically, we've used it within sort of our quite an extensive programme of work, but we've also used it in sessions that are an hour and a half or 2 hours just as a one-off piece of support work with a group of leaders. So there's been quite a lot of flexibility in how we've been able to use the readiness checklist. Primarily, it's been a focused conversation that helps people to think about what's in place to support change now and what gaps can you identify. Next slide, please. Excuse me. So these are just some of the thoughts from people that have fed back to us over 4 of our sites as well as that of our team. I've talked a little bit about the kind of flexibility and the use of the readiness checklist. I think that's been absolutely key for us. We've used it up and down the country. We've also used it in different settings. So we've used it in health and social care partnerships, but we've also used it within universities, so with our higher educational institutions, as well as social work services in children, adult and justice. So we found it as a tool that's very adaptable. It's also quite accessible for us as facilitators, so it's not the scariest thing in the roadmap for using, I would suggest. It's actually something that you can kind of pick up and get to grips with. So if you're in a role where you're the facilitator, it's actually something that we've found you can use quite easily. I suppose we really get feedback from local areas that it's very collaborative, so it's a tool that helps to develop partnership working. And that's certainly been the experience of our team, but also across all of our sites that we've made use of it with. I think part of that is because it really helps people in the room to identify all the achievements that they've already made, but also helps to have a very focused and specific conversation in a structured way about identifying challenges and gaps. We've heard from leaders that it helps them to really connect with the work and supports their buy-in. I think people have commented already today that sometimes not just the roadmap, but trauma responsive system change risks feeling quite daunting to people, particularly in complex systems. So what we've experienced as leaders coming to that work, feeling a bit overwhelmed with it all, feeling there's an awful lot to do, and actually using this tool to slow leaders down and to really think about it, helps them identify specific things around leadership, culture and workforce wellbeing that's relevant to their direct work, either strategically or operationally. There's lots of different ways to use this, and I don't think there's one way. In our experience over the last year to use the readiness checklist, it's been really helpful prior to baseline assessment. We've also used it with areas that have already got their plans and their priorities in place. So yeah, I think that kind of flexibility is really important. Excuse me, next slide. Excuse me. It's not surprising that people are really passionate about this work, and understandably they often want to push forward with change quite quickly. We've certainly found within social work services that the workforce are working already with people who have experienced lots of inequalities in their lives and find that this works really, really well and complementary to what they're doing day to day. But what we've heard from leaders is they found it helpful to use the readiness checklist just to pause and slow things down and not push forward too quickly without thinking about the role of leadership strategically and operationally and their, I suppose, interdependencies in terms of influencing culture. So these are just some comments that we've heard from people that we've been supporting. Thanks. I hope that's been helpful and we can answer some questions later. Thanks, Suzi.
So I'm just going to say a few final words in the last couple of minutes. I want to start by thanking everyone for coming along today. I can see from the feedback in the chat and from those in Menti that, you know, there's this really energised people, but we really, nonetheless, we really value your time and your input and your efforts to kind of engage actively and positively with this. We really do hope you found it a helpful session, that you'll take away things that you can use and, you know, connect and energise and remind yourself to start where you are, you know, all that great stuff that we've heard today. I think that's amazing. So just a kind of few final points. The publication of the roadmap and this event come at a really critical time, given that a commitment to a trauma-informed approach is increasingly embedded in legislation, in national strategies and in practice guidance. Developing a trauma-informed and responsive services, systems and forces, which is not easy to say, is key to delivering various key local and national priorities and supports wider agendas around developing person-centred services, around public service reform and reducing inequalities. So don't see this as a standalone add-on thing, very much see it as a linkage across and a way of holding various bits of work together. That's the way I try to think about it anyway. So working in a way that recognises and responds to the prevalence and impact of trauma is not something additional to our work. It's an opportunity to reorientate our focus towards how we do what we do, embedding the key principles of safety, trust, choice, collaboration and empowerment within organisational cultures, ways of working and how we design and deliver public services. We've heard today about one of the tools available to us, which is the roadmap, and some of the different ways organisations are using the roadmap creatively and flexibly, recognising that embedding trauma-informed and responsive approach within our services, systems and workforces is a long-term improvement journey that requires commitment, capacity and collective leadership. We hope people are leaving here today feeling energised and inspired by the collective work that's happening across services, systems and workforces in Scotland. And we hope you're leaving here today with an idea of how you can use the roadmap in your own teams, in your own services and your own organisations to drive this work forward in your own sphere of influence.